There were only 2 days left before the month of Ramadan began, but there wasn't a single grain of food in Zarina's house. Her 4 small children were exhausted from hunger. After not eating anything all day, by evening they kept looking at their mother with hopeful eyes, but Zarina had nothing to offer them. Since the death of her husband, her life had been filled with nothing but starvation and helplessness. Sitting in the corner of her house, deep in thought, she wondered how her children would fast the next day if there was nothing to eat. At that moment, a thought came to her mind. Cameron. He was the close friend of her late husband and the owner of a shop in the neighborhood. After her husband's death, Cameron had often helped Zarina and even lent her money many times. With a sense of hope, Zarina gathered her trembling steps and walked toward Cameron's shop. Upon reaching the shop, Zarina folded her hands and said, "Cameron brother, for the sake of Allah, please give me some ration. My children are starving. Ramadan is coming, and I promise I will repay this loan somehow." Cameron glanced at the other customers in the shop, then quietly walked towards Zarina, lowered his voice, and said, "Zarina, I can give you not just rations, but enough money for the entire month of Ramadan. Your children will have good food, you will have iftar, and you will even be able to buy new clothes for Eid. But there's one condition." Zarina looked at him in surprise. "What condition?" Cameron looked toward the shop door as if checking if anyone was listening, then leaned closer, smiled, and whispered, "Just spend one night with me, and I'll make sure you and your children will never lack anything. I have always been fascinated by your beauty. Agree, and your fate and your children's fate will change." Zarina felt as though a dagger had pierced her body. She stood there frozen, unable to speak. Cameron smiled and added, "Don't decide now. Think about it until tomorrow. I'll be waiting." Zarina's feet felt as though they had turned to stone. In a daze, she walked out of the shop and headed home. Upon reaching her house, she closed the door and sat down against the wall. Her children were still looking at her with hopeful eyes. Their lips were dry from hunger, and her heart wept for them. Was poverty pushing her to the point where she would have to risk her dignity? Did she really have no other option? With only 1 day left until Ramadan, Zarina's life seemed to be getting worse by the day. Hunger and helplessness were breaking her from the inside. That night, as she lay in bed, Cameron's words echoed in her ears. "Just one night and everything will be fine." She tried to steady herself, but the reality was that she was exhausted, working all day in other people's houses, enduring scoldings, wandering around for a few coins as she couldn't take it anymore. Was it really true that hard work could fix everything? That thought filled her with self-loathing. But another question rose from deep within. What would happen if she accepted Cameron's offer? She tried to shake the thought out of her mind, but a voice inside kept asking, "What about the children? Should I let them starve too?" The next morning, Zarina forced herself to get up and decided to go to work at Ramshaw's house. Ramshaw was a woman from a respectable family who had known Zarina for years, but Zarina always found her husband, Jubair, strange. He never said anything, but there was something in his gaze that made Zarina uneasy. When Zarina arrived at Ramshaw's house, Jubair opened the door. Zarina was startled and asked, "Is Ramshaw not home?" Jubair smiled slightly and shook his head. She went to her parents' house. "You can come in and work. There's a lot to do." Zarina hesitated for a moment, feeling an odd sense of suspicion, but she told herself she was overthinking. She went in and started her work, but her heart and mind were restless. As she washed the dishes, her hands slowed, and as she cleaned, she kept sitting down. She was tired. And there was one more reason for this weariness. Cameron's words kept repeating in her head. "One night and your life will change." Suddenly, Jubair came and closed the door behind her. Zarina turned around, her heart racing. "There's a lot of work to do. I need to finish quickly. My children are hungry," she said quickly. Jubair stepped closer. "I can solve the problem of your hungry children. You don't need to go anywhere else." Zarina's eyes widened in shock and fear. "What do you mean?" Jubair sat down on a chair, took a deep breath, and said, "You need money, right? And you're probably thinking about it. Why wander around when I can give you everything you need?" Zarina's heart started pounding. She stepped back. "What are you talking about? I'm here just to work." Jubair smiled and said, I'm talking about the same thing Cameron mentioned, but I'm willing to give you more." For Zarina, the house now felt like a prison. She didn't want to stay there for even a moment longer. She rushed toward the door, but Jubir immediately grabbed it. "Where are you going? Take your time. Make your decision. You need money, right?" Zarina felt a jolt of electricity run through her body. With all her strength, she pushed Jubir away and rushed toward the door. He tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off and bolted out the door. She ran down the street, heart pounding and breath ragged, as though someone was chasing her. When she reached her house, she stopped for a moment and looked behind her. Jubir hadn't followed, but his devilish smile echoed in her mind. Once inside, she locked the door and sat against the wall, trembling. The world seemed so cruel, treating a woman's honor as the cheapest thing. Her mind was in turmoil at Cameron's offer, Jubir's words, the poverty, the hunger, the struggle. Everything swirled inside her like a storm. Was it possible to live with dignity? Should she accept Cameron's offer? Was this really the only way out for her and her children? Since her husband's death, Zarina's life had been a series of endless trials. She had hoped her brother would help her, but he had completely ignored her. She remembered when her sister-in-law first came into the house. Her brother had changed. The man who once cared for his sister's happiness now couldn't even look at her. Her brother quickly married her off to a poor man, telling himself his responsibility was over. Zarina's fate seemed to have been written for a humble life, but fate hadn't given her many joys. A few years later, her husband had been killed in an accident, and Zarina found herself at a crossroads. She was left in a place where only hunger and helplessness existed. Her in-laws didn't think twice and threw her out of the house with her 4 young children. The only place left for her to seek refuge was her own brother, Jamshid. But when she went there, her sister-in-law scolded her at the door, saying, "This house is not an orphanage. We don't need to hear your stories of hunger." Jamshid stood in front, watching everything but saying nothing. He was getting out of his car, holding a burger, and his children were throwing the same burger into the trash. Zarina, with a trembling voice, said to her brother, "Jamshid, my children are hungry. Please help us." But Jamshid flatly refused. "You're fine, go work. No need to beg from others," he said. It was as if a stone had hit Zarina. The brother who had once said, "A big brother is like a father," was now sending her away empty-handed. Poverty changes even the closest of relationships. Zarina had no option but to hide the tears in her eyes. Silently, she turned and walked away. Her steps grew weak as she thought about her children's hunger, but she couldn't stop now. Ramadan was just a day away, and she had nothing. She thought maybe she could go work somewhere to at least arrange food for her children for Iftar Sehri. But she couldn't go to Cameron's shop. She didn't want to face his gaze again or hear his words. So, she decided to go somewhere new where she had never worked before. She went to a large house in the neighborhood and asked for work. The mistress of the house welcomed her inside and told her to clean the whole house, wash the sofas, and polish the windows and walls. "I'll pay you well for it," she promised. Zarina's eyes lit up with hope. If she earned good money today, she could buy sehri, iftar, and maybe even clothes for the kids for Eid. She forgot her exhaustion and worked tirelessly from morning till evening, cleaning every room, washing the sofas, and polishing the windows and walls. Sweat poured down her face, and her body ached, but she held on to the hope that she would get good money. When she was done, she stood up to collect her payment, but the mistress handed her only 500 rupees. Zarina's face turned pale. "Just 500? I've cleaned the whole house. This work is worth at least 4,000. The mistress laughed and said, 4,000? Do you think you're worth that much? I'm doing you a favor by letting you work. After all, with all the rumors about you, no one would give you work." Zarina's heart sank. Was this poverty a punishment? Without saying anything, she left the house quietly. Night had fallen, and Sehri time was just hours away. She had 500 rupees in her hand, but she knew it wouldn't be enough for anything. She went to the shop to buy ration, but the shopkeeper said, "Zarina, you already have a balance of 1,000 rupees. I can't give you more credit." Zarina sat down helplessly on the ground. The soil of poverty had completely covered her existence. Cameron's words echoed in her mind. Just one night, everything will change. Her hands shook, and tears filled her eyes. Was there really no way out? For Zarina, the moon of Ramadan didn't bring happiness, but another test. The time for Sehri was approaching, and she had nothing. Looking at her children with empty hands, she had no choice but to go to her brother Jamshid's store once again. Every year during Ramadan, Jamshid would show off by distributing rations to the poor in the neighborhood. It was well known that Jamshid had helped many needy people. Zarina thought for a moment, maybe she could go and ask him. Maybe he would give her something after all. She was in need too. But then she remembered that the same brother who was giving to everyone else had never helped his own sister. His wife had even threatened her, saying, "Forget about coming here for help. Rashid will take care of your needs." These words were spoken years ago, but they still stung like fresh wounds in her heart. But today, Zarina had no other option. She wore a black shawl to hide her identity and walked slowly toward her brother's house. When she knocked on the door, her sister-in-law opened it. Zarina, with a faint glimmer of hope, said, "Sister-in-law, it's Ramadan, my children are hungry. Please give us some flour." There was no softness in her sister-in-law's face. "Go away, we've already distributed the ration. If you want something, stand in line with the others," she said. Zarina's heart felt like it was being crushed. "Please, for the sake of God, just give me something, even if it's just the charity for my children." But her sister-in-law didn't even hesitate and slammed the door in her face. Zarina stood there for a moment, as if her breath had stopped. "Have I truly become so insignificant that my own brother doesn't recognize me anymore?" Just then, Jamshid's car pulled up, and his children, sitting in the car, were eating burgers. As soon as they got out, they threw the half-eaten burgers into the trash. Zarina quietly removed her shawl, hoping her brother would recognize her. Jamshid, surprised, said, "What's this? What are you doing here?" Zarina could hardly speak. With great difficulty, she said, "Brother, my children are hungry. Please, for God's sake, help us." Jamshid, in a harsh tone, said, "You're fine, go work. Why do you always come here asking for help?" Zarina's eyes filled with tears. "My children are hungry. I've tried everything. No one has given me any work. Please just give me some charity. God will reward you." But Jamshid shook his hand and said, "I've already given charity. I have nothing left." Hearing this, Zarina felt like everything had broken inside her. She slowly bent down and wrapped the half-eaten burgers from the trash in her shawl. As she turned to leave, her eyes filled with tears. She had barely taken a few steps when she bumped into someone. The burgers fell from her hand and landed on the ground. She looked up and saw a man standing in front of her, staring at her intently. Her eyes widened in surprise. "You're Zarina, right?" Hearing these words, Zarina's heart seemed to stop. She looked up hesitantly, and there he was, Wasim, the man she had once banished from her life years ago. Her heart raced, and she quickly bent down to pick up the burgers and wrapped them back in her shawl. "Zarina, wait!" Wasim called after her, his voice full of disbelief. He couldn't believe she was the same Zarina he had left years ago. Zarina paused for a moment but then quickly walked away, wishing he hadn't recognized her. She wished she hadn't returned to this street, but fate always brought people together in the most unexpected ways. As she reached home, her children looked up at her with hungry, innocent eyes, waiting for a miracle. Zarina opened her shawl and placed the half-eaten burgers in front of them. The children eagerly grabbed them, and Zarina's eyes filled with tears. These burgers had come from the trash, but for her children, they were a blessing. Wasim's voice echoed in her mind, "Talk to your brother and sister-in-law. I can do a lot to help you." But Zarina had long since given up hope in her brother and his wife. Wasim's name had been erased from her life years ago. She stood by the window, looking out, the deep pain in her heart resurfacing. Zarina's story with Wasim was an old one. He had been a childhood friend and had always been kind to her. When his mother made something nice, he would bring it to Zarina. He would always stand at her door with a smile, and whenever Zarina returned his dishes, he would say, "You're so nice. I really like you." Zarina would always shyly close the door but secretly believed that Wasim was a good man. But one day, Jamshid had seen them talking and got angry. "Who was this?" he asked. Zarina had quickly explained, "He lives in the neighborhood. He brought food for us." Jamshid, furious, told her, "If he comes to the door again, Don't open it. Boys like him are trouble. Wasim stopped coming after that. Then one day, Jamshid announced that he had found a girl he wanted to marry. Zarina hoped for peace, but everything changed once his wife entered the picture. From that day on, Zarina became nothing more than a servant in her own home. Wasim, whenever he could, would ask about her, but Jamshid's wife found out her and made sure to stop him. Eventually, Wasim left her and told Zarina, "If you trust your brother, let him decide. I'll be back in 5 years. If you want, you can wait for me." But Zarina couldn't make any promises. She knew her life would be controlled by her brother and his wife. Jamshid's choice for her was a security guard who had a low-paying job. A few years later, he passed away, leaving Zarina alone.